Welcome pilots to this Jetworks build video. What you see is what you get, the gorgeous Folland Gnat part jet. I decided after my recent crashes I'd build a trainer plane. Here's hoping this one helps a bit. Chose to build a 64mm FMS EDF version, and here we are starting with the fuselage bottom piece, obviously marking out the intakes, but here I've measuring the can for the FMS 64mm, and Craig does a fantastic job in terms of making sure that the EDFs are in the correct position for in terms of thrust and balance, etc. However, not all EDF units are the same size and the same shape. So what I'm doing here is keeping the rear bulkhead, keeping that on the plan as it is, in the forward one the same on the top panel where the two meet. Just moving it back, I think it's about 4mm. That way when I fit the EDF unit itself with the two bulkheads, then fingers crossed it's going to be a perfect match. And I made this mistake with the Raptor, the F22. I didn't bother measuring it. I just straight ahead, usual typical Fleming style, just crashed on and started building. And then when I got to fitting the EDF unit itself, there was a big gap at the front intake. I used some scraps of 6mm foam to mark it and fill the gaps, make sure it was as clean as possible, but clearly wasn't the best. So once you've done that, moving on, next step is Bulkhead 1 and 3. Here we are with the forward fuselage bottom piece and the bulkheads themselves. Just retest fit, obviously make sure they're in the correct orientation. Use whatever glue it is that you choose and prefer. Here I'm using UHU, just a wee bit on the contact surfaces. Just make sure it's a wee bit tacky. Put it in and allow it to set and go off. Next step's forward fuselage corner reinforcers and marking them up onto the belly panel. Now I'm just using one of the 6mm pieces of foam and keeping it flush against the outside of the belly panel and marking on the inside. That way when we go and put the fuselage sides on, the aim is to have it nice and flush and nice and straight. So once you've marked it, just try and get both sides as even as possible. I'm putting a wee bit of glue on the end pieces close to the bulkheads so that they stick to the bulkheads and not just the belly panel itself. So as you can see, just offering it up, get a wee smudge of it and put it into place. The next two parts, again, just measure them up, make sure that they fit. If there's any trimming needs done, where I've had to trim a couple of pieces, just make sure that they fit nice and evenly before you put them in. Here I've offered both of them up together and put a small bead of glue on both of them so it was nice and thin application. Next step's the forward fuselage sides and the bulkhead 2, which for some reason, I don't know, I've no filmed it or lost it somewhere. Surprise, surprise. So at the trailing edge of the fuselage sides, there should be a wee 45-degree bevel. Should really be sanding them off, but I've chosen just to use a sharp blade and just be careful when you're using blades, just to trim it off. Had it up against the side of the table just to form it and get as close to the shape of the corner reinforcements as possible. Adding some glue to the contact surfaces and obviously smudging up the 45-degree bevel, and that's trying to keep it as nice and clean, airflow moving towards the intake as possible. So all the contact surfaces, this wee part here, that's just going to be as close the tooth part at the rear moving forward to the intake. As you can see, the wee cheater hole there. So offering it up, give it a wee smudge about so it's a nice even application along it. Give it a chance to air dry a little. Then put it up, meeting at the bulkhead number 1. Here I'm just using a wee modelling pin just to sort of hold it in place. because no doubt I've not left it long enough to air dry. The back looks nice and smooth and clean, nice tight fit with a sort of diamond point. Looks good. And then just the corner reinforcers, just make sure they're forced up against the side panel and you've got a nice join. Here are a couple of wee modelling pins just to hold things in place, just in case it pops off. Once you're happy with that, the next step is the canopy supports and the upper fuselage inner, the forward piece. So the canopy supports pretty much straightforward. Just offer up a wee bit of glue to one side and then meet both of them together, making sure they're the opposite sides so there's a nice smooth application and then not too much glue. Here I offered up the nose cone, and the reason for that is just to have a wee look at the sizes, whether the side panels are fine, because I got the plans of a friend. He printed them off, and his intention was to build it, but I think it's a wee bit scary for him, so he gave me the plans and I've built them, but I'm not actually too sure they came out the printer very well, because in this step, using the upper piece, it just wasn't fitting quite right. Off camera there, I've trimmed it up a little, and then, like I say, true Fleming fashion and scratch building, we'll fix it. We'll get to it, and you'll probably see it later on in the build. So, as per the plan, just a wee bit of glue in the slots, and then offer up the top piece. Next, it's on to the last two fuselage forward pieces. On the top piece, just a wee bit of glue, smudge it about so it's nice and even, and I offered it up to the table there just so it was nice and flush. And then the same again, just wipe the glue about, give it a wee chance to air dry a bit. And allow it to dry. So like I say, in the magnet panel, for some reason, oh there it's there, I didn't think I had it. Surprise. Pretty straightforward this part. Wee bit of glue on both sides and then offer up the magnet panel. Next step, lower corner reinforcers and the intake panel. So as you can see at the back there, at the rear part of the fuselage, there's a 10mm piece of scrap foam just to give it that nice bevel, as it says in the plans. On the bottom piece, I've just flipped it over and marked it with a biro pen just to see where it is that I'm going to glue, so that I'm not actually putting too much glue on the outer surfaces. Offer it up into position and slide it about, smudge it about so there's a nice smooth even application of the glue. Take it off, get a wee bit of chance to air dry, but there was a couple of dry spots there, so I added a wee bit extra glue. And then on the sides where it meets up against the fuselage side panels, just a wee bit of glue there as well. Offer it back up into position and allow it to dry. Still keeping that 10mm curve moving to the rear. Put a wee bit of scrap foam back in place. So on to the lower corner reinforcers. I have actually stuck both of them together. I'm sure you'll manage that with whatever glue it is you use, and then carefully with a sharp blade cutting the bevel again around 45 degrees, I think it is. So once I've cut both, getting another piece of 6mm foam and marking the inside, again keeping it as flush as possible to the outer surface of the belly panel itself, so that when we put on the rear panels again, it should be nice and flush and you've got a flat finish and good contact surfaces for both the rear and the side panels when you go to attaching them. So again, a wee bit of glue on both the parts and allow it to air dry so it's tacky. Here I'm putting some on, but you can't really see, it's just a very thin bead. Smudging it about, making sure there's a nice surface area, allowing it to dry a bit. Again there, so it's nice and tacky, so when I offer it up, it should stick in principle. And it did, it went down pretty well. Again, same with the opposite side. offering it up to the line that you're drawing, so that you're leaving a 6mm gap on the outside. Just check you've got a nice flush finish. At the end there was a couple of wee scrap pieces, so I just trimmed it off so it was nice and flat. So here we are with the Edf Bulkheads. Now you can use but a 3mm ply, maybe 2 pieces, laminate them together, or even 3D print apart. Here I've chose to use the foam. I don't have any issues with foam, it only seems to be trees that I have issues with, or sometimes the ground comes up too quick. But here we are just testing the fit of the unit, and as I say, with the initial trimming of the belly panel earlier, moving that front slot back 4mm, it fit absolutely sweet. It was perfect, really fantastic. So here we're just measuring up the ESC and the motor wires, just to see in case I need to extend the wires before we actually get to fit in the Edf unit in itself. Apply a wee bit of glue in the slots where it is that you're about to put the bulkheads in. As you can see, the rear one I kept that on, just so I didn't get confused as to what one's what. And then again, squeezing it into place to make sure it's nice and flat and flush, so that when I go to attach the thrust tube and the intake, it's nice and flush against the bulkheads itself. So sliding them into position, trying to get them as neat as possible. A wee bit of glue on the tabs that are going to go into the belly panel itself, and then just push it into place. Try and line it up, make sure it's nice and square. And it'll look pretty good. This is going to be a wee rocket. Next step, the fuselage side pieces and the Edf exhaust. So here the side pieces, just measuring it up, making sure that it's the right length. Like I say, in the plans I got, there was a couple of parts that was quite off. Wee bit forming on the table just to give it a gentle curve so it matches up against the fuselage side. Apply some glue, a wee thin bead along the side. Off the up and smudge it about so there's a nice even contact. And as you can see, I am actually allowing one side there to air dry, so it's nice and tacky, and it should fit together. Oh, and there's the second piece as well. Well done, Baz. So starting from the rear, offer it up to both the belly panel. Bear in mind there's a 10mm curve, and onto the side panel, the corner reinforcers that we put up. Make sure it's nice flush and even fit, starting from the back moving forward. It'll fit pretty well. A wee modelling pin on the side just to hold the side panels against it. Next step was both the belly panels. I have shaped them slightly with a wee bevel cut. The rest will take off later when it comes to sanding. And here I'm using M77 3M77 spray adhesive. It's really great in terms of laminating pieces like this. It's very quick. Give it a good even coat. Give it a second or two to become tacky, and then offer it up. And then the same with the outer piece. You do get a couple of seconds or so just to move it about and get into position, but it works really well. Next step was the thrust tube and the exhaust. So here, these parts I've printed in the lightweight PLA. Can't get enough of this stuff. There is a wee bit bobbling on the inside, so well, a wee bit of sandpaper just sanded it off. Once I've offered it up to the Edf unit, I just marked roughly where I expect the wires to come out of the motor, and just cutting a small hole. Again, with the lightweight PLA, that it cuts very easily. It's nice and soft, so just be careful. You don't want to put a big slice in it. Once I'm happy that the wires go through, just a wee bit of glue onto it and offer it up to the rear bulkhead so that there's glue on both sides, and again allow it to air dry slightly so it's nice and tacky. And when you put it up, You can just hopefully get it in a position the first time, and then it'll be stuck. So once we've fed the wires through, just line it up and then push it against the bulkhead. Just using a wee Allen key there just to press it up against, and it looks nice and flush inside, so I'm happy with that. Then the exhaust bulkhead, small amount of glue around the contact surfaces. It doesn't go all the way around, there's just a couple of points that it actually meets. On the exhaust itself, just a wee bit of glue around about it so that when I slide it on, it holds everything into place. I'm hoping that I don't have any accidents and crashes and have to re-modify it, but I'm pretty sure that this will be fine. It is a trainer plane. So there's the 3D printed exhaust, absolutely stunning piece. Again in lightweight PLA. Offered up a wee bit of glue just to make sure it's all nice and fine, and a couple of modelling pins in at the side just to hold the belly panels onto the exhaust bulkhead. A wee bit of glue on it, ready to fit the exhaust, the thrust tube. Like I say, I'm sure I only printed this in 3 walls, I think it was, sorry, and there is no infill in it. My only worry was the elevator control surfaces, but we'll find out. So to line it up, what I did is, you can see there I've got 2 boxes, same size, and putting a couple of carbon pieces in it, and from the front, from the nose, looking at it, try and get it as flush as possible. Next step's the nose cone. You can form it out of foam, however it's stunning in the lightweight PLA, the joys of 3D printing. Just fitting the nose cone aligner, a wee spot of glue in there, and then some glue around the contact surface itself. Offer it up to the fuselage and allow it to set. Make sure it's tacky. What I did, I've just checked it to see if there was any dry spots in terms of where the glue is on the nose cone. Added a wee bit extra, and then offer it up, let it stick. Next step is the forward fuselage sides outer. As you can see there, the nose cone's already attached. So here, one of the pieces, I've actually pre-sanded it, and it tapers right off back at the entrance to the EDF intakes itself. Did this sanding part straight away because it will certainly be harder to sand later on. Again, I'm using 3M spray, and as you can see, with a light coat, just offer up, slide it into position, and it sticks pretty well. It's fantastic stuff, especially for that quick stick. Next step is sanding, my favourite. However, you'll be glad to know that I didn't bother to show you the whole sanding step. I'm sure you're aware of how to do that. So we're moving on to setting the wings and the rear elevator as well at the same time. There's no point in, once I've got the epoxy out, I'll just mix enough to do both. And as we normally do, I've chosen the nice side, presentation side, bit of low tack tape on the outer surfaces, and the reason I put it on before I pick out the carbon spar, sorry, not the carbon spar, the 6mm foam strip that's in there, is just to make sure that, you know, the surface is even distance all the way, and I'm not having to force a carbon spar in or having too much of a gap. So once you've got both of them done, trimmed up, measure up your carbon spar, make sure it fits quite nicely, and then onto the elevators. Again, I've used, in fact these parts are printed in PLA, just normal PLA in the white. A wee bit of tape on the bottom of it, again just so it gives you a nice finish on the top surface and nice and smooth, and obviously, you know, gluing your elevator to your build table, which certainly wouldn't be very clever. So I'm just tucking up the end pieces there, just to make sure that if it does come out, it's not going to, you know, overspill too much. Now, with this amount of holes or gaps, I would normally probably mix up about 20 grams, obviously 10 and 10 each, epoxy and resin. Here I've only mixed up 14, 7 and 7, and I'm adding the micro balloons just to spin it out a wee bit. Loving these micro balloons, how they actually work. I should have weighed it to see how much is actually coming from it. Just carefully apply your epoxy to the inner parts, obviously on the tape, but most importantly the side pieces. Not too much. Now there is a wee bit that's spilled out there just at the end, but it's nothing to worry about. You can trim that back later. And again, where the carbon slot's due to go, just put your epoxy in. Make sure it's nice and level on the bottom, and also the sides, making sure that the side parts on the walls, there's a nice coating of epoxy on there as well, not just on the bottom surface of the tape. Apply your carbon spars, and then whatever epoxy you've got left, I just spread it about the top. Really, you should, and the build guide will say that, use some tape, line it on each side, and it gives you a fantastic clean finish. Great tip from Craig. However, the excitement sometimes, like I say, I just go ahead and start taping things up and gluing it. Once you allow it to dry carefully, pull it off, and if you pull it off, even at 100 degree, 80 degrees, try and keep it nice and flat, and pull it away at the same angle. And you can see there a couple of wee spots because I didn't have some on the sides properly. So here, to get the 22 millimeter anhedral on the wings, just taping up the wings together and then getting some scrap pieces of foam. There was some 6mm foam and some 3mm. I think it was 21 degrees I got. Mix up your epoxy and apply it to the inside so there's a nice good bond. A wee bit extra on the top. Allow that to set. Next step is supposed to be fitting the exhaust, but as you've seen, we've already done that. And then fixing the elevator. So now that the exhaust's on, what I'm using here is some snakes. I'm not actually too sure what the right name for them is, but obviously there's a tube there with outer tube and the push rod on the inside. You can use straws. I have used them in the past just to hold them in position, but this is from, believe it or not, one of my crashed builds, and I'm just feeding that through, making sure that it's going through to the front where the servos are due to go. I've slid it in. I've left the straws in there, the outer cables, the outer tube, and a wee bit of hot glue just to hold them in place. Here I've put some balsa on the leading edge as well, again to try and reinforce things and keep them as safe as possible, because the elevators will be quite low to the ground, so just be careful where belly landing, especially if you're in long grass. So I'm feeding the push rod through, and then fitting the elevators just to mark up how much of the push rod I actually need before I go cutting it. As you can see, it moves quite freely on there. Gorgeous fit. And I've fed it through the linkage stopper just to see how much force there is, if there's any fight back on the push rod itself that might need to bend in its shape, whether it's a Z bend that I put in it, but it all seemed pretty good. So once test fitted them, happy with that, it's time to fit them, get some Z bend, get a wee Z bend on the end for obviously fitting the controls for the servo. Because I've got the linkage stopper on the elevator itself, this will be on the outside. So when I fit the servo on the inside and glue things up, I ain't getting to that unless it's going to have to be cut out. So at the bottom there, on the corner reinforcer, I actually dug it out a wee bit just so that the servo arm moves quite freely, and as you can see, there's a wee pen mark on it for a biro just to show where I will be installing it. So once I've centered the servo arms, put the fixing screw on it, I'm just pushing through the push rod. It's actually, I think it's the end piece which is quite dramatic when it comes to movements later on, when you'll see when I'm testing the elevator control surface itself and movement. So I would suggest probably halfway up the control arm is more than enough. However, I'll be able to trim that back in terms of the throws by using it, adjusting it through the radio. So once I've got the Z-bend onto the servo, force it through the straw out to the rear end. As you can see, I've got a wee bit of tape on it, checking it, making sure it works fine, nice and freely. Putting the exhaust intake in, the EDF intake in, just to make sure it's nice and free and it's not obstructing the servo arm movement. And do the exact same on the opposite side. As you can see, they're just trying to get it in the wee thin straw, the outer tube. A bit fiddly, but once it's in, that's it, it's no coming out. Wee bit of hot glue just to attach it, and just hold it in place until it goes off. Here we're fitting the servos for the ailerons. Again, just a wee bit of hot glue in that hole on the side, just pushing it through, attach the servo with hot glue. Actually a wee bit of glue around the outsides as well, just to try and keep it as firm as possible, and hope that it doesn't pop off halfway through the flight. I'm just using 9 gram metal gear servos. These are the Tower Pros originals, bought from a well-known hobby store, not online and getting some cheap nasty imitations. However, servos do fail. Fingers crossed these ones don't, especially where they're fitted. So I've just marked up the intake. I'm using a pen to see where it's going to fit. A wee bit of glue on the intake itself, smudge it about at the Edf bulkhead, give it a wee time to air dry. I did think about putting hot glue there, but I chose not to. So offer up your EDF intake to the bulkhead itself, and just push it and slide it into place and give it a chance to go off and set nice and firm. So pulling the intakes, the wee leaves at the side, just pulled them away from the side panels and offered up some hot glue to make sure that they're stuck good and well. And just be careful at this point when you add hot glue, which I'm sure you all know is hot. It says it in the name. When you put it together, I'm smoothing it off with my fingers, but if you're quick, rub your fingers together and the hot glue will come off pretty quickly, and try not to burn yourself. So here we've got the wing itself done, the elevator's done. So now we're fiddling about with the wires and making sure that they're in place, everything works fine. I've tested it off, and now we're on to fitting the wing to the fuselage. Just there, I did point out there was a line right along the underside of the wing. That's the measurements for the centre of gravity taken from the plans, and it's on the underside so that I don't kind of lose it later on. So now that we've got the ESC and our server wires hooked up, you can see they're just moving it to the side. I've marked the wing plate where I'm going to cut away a wee bit so that the ESC is in there nice and tight, and it doesn't flap about. Hopefully no getting sucked into the Edf unit itself. Here I'm choosing to use some hot glue, so it's a nice quick fit, and I hold it for a minute or two, and then that way it should be nice and stuck. The last thing we want is the wing and the side panels not actually lining up very well. So now that that's stuck, the wee part that I marked away for the ESC, just cutting that out. The wee part there, it was quite tight with the epoxy in the middle. Wee bit of hot glue around a bit just to secure the front of it, and a wee bit extra on the top. And hopefully that will keep the ESC nice and tight in place. So here I'm just cutting an extra hole in the wing plate itself so that I can feed down the wires. I'm using some snips there because the epoxy was obviously quite hard and not going to get cut by a wee hobby blade. And I've chosen to house the receiver in the battery bay just underneath the hatch. That way I will crash it, I know I will, and that way I can at least get to that and hopefully and not lose any connections and stuff. So the next step is the air intake top parts, and we're going to glue in the fuselage top as well. So here just offering it up, and as you can see at the back I still have the rear tail piece that if you were to build it using foam, you would keep these parts in place. So just offering it up, a wee bit of glue, smudge again both sides as to where they're going to contact on the wing itself, and then the contact surfaces round about on the side panels and the bulkheads as well, obviously at the rear exhaust panel as well, just making sure there's a bit of glue on the contact surfaces and a wee bit in the Edf bulkhead slots as well. So just offer it up into position. Obviously the front we gave it a chance to air dry, so it stuck pretty well, nice and quick. And once you're happy with that, just teased it into place where I'm happy that it's nice and even in the middle. And then just a wee trim of the additional pieces that I no longer need, and I will be sanding that back later as well. And then the top pieces, these were a wee bit fiddly. I was a wee bit confused by the plan as to how I cut them, but I think after about 10-15 minutes looking at the plan and looking at the foam and figuring it out, then it worked, and it fit pretty well as also, so it's always a good thing when it fits. So we bead of glue on both the contact surfaces, smudging it about to make sure it's a nice even application, and taking them off, allow them air dry. Clever me. And again, just squeezing things a wee bit together, a wee bit tighter. Once the side panels were nice and tacky, I then offed them back up to the top panel itself, and then tidied up the wires. So here we're on to the fuselage top piece. I did again just a wee bit of sanding and a wee bit of shaping, so that when it goes on together and I get to sanding it later for the final sand, I'm not taking so much off. This part here I had to mess about a wee bit with the wires, and I should have actually used the slots in the Edf bulkhead itself to feed the wires through, but again, true Fleming style, just crashed on and built it up. So offering up the top panel, as you can see there, I'm having to trim a wee part away because we're now got the wires across the top. But in all honesty, it all fit pretty good there anyway, so I was more than happy with how it looks, because it looks gorgeous already, and what it was trying to achieve there. So the top piece, right at the biggest part of the wing plate, the glue, you can see some smudged about there. A wee bit of hot glue to hold the wires down, and at the bulkheads to make sure that I've got that nice quick bond there. And then on with the top panel, tucking in the wires, hoping that they don't get glued down. Next step is the turtle deck. So here I chose to build the turtle deck on the table, and again just thinking about things, measuring it up, we trim here and there of the angles that it should be at, offering up a wee bit of glue and making sure it's nice and tacky, allowing it to air dry at the back, at the front there. Once it's air dried, stick that on, and the same with the tail piece itself. There we go. Once we're happy that they've had a wee bit of time to air dry again, offer them up to each other, and the tail as well. Now you need to make sure that they are dry, because there's a wee bit of bend in it. It will cause one of them to pop off, if not both, if the glue's not tacky enough. So the corner reinforcers, I chose to put a wee bit of glue and build both of them together, stick them together, and build it in a separate way from the plan. We trim so it was nice and flush fit. So here we are, just checking it out against the top of the fuselage and making sure that I'm happy with the fit. Now the turtle deck top, again choosing to build this on the table so it's nice and flat and flush, rather than building it onto the fuselage, and knowing me, you probably end up with the wrong angle or something and have to trim and cut and sand, which is not my favourite part. So offer the glue up, give it a wee chance to air dry, and then slide it into position. It looked fantastic. And then the turtle deck reinforcers, again, a good bit of glue on both sides, and just smudge it out so it's nice and even, and then slide it into place. And I think out of all, this is one part that fit pretty perfect, the turtle deck reinforcers. I didn't need any trimming at all. So now that you've got that, it's time to attach it to the fuselage itself. And here I'm just lining it up with the top of the turtle deck piece with the lines of the wings itself, and it all looks pretty good. There was a wee bit of a bump there moving forward to the tail, but I'm happy with that because I'll just sand it back. See here, I used some hot glue just so it was a nice quick stick, held it on, and then at the back I do offer up some hot glue into the back as well, and just try and make sure that it's as level as possible. Now the turtle deck canopy bulkhead and the vertical stabilizer. Quickly moving on to the canopy. 3D printed, obviously, but in this case, I've got the 3D printed one there, and I got the clear canopy from Craig. Don't think we've missed out on the last step, we will come back to it. But here I've used the 3D printed canopy and slide that inside the clear one so that I can mark a line with a Sharpie, as you've seen there, just to get the basic shape before I trim it a bit more. And a nice sharp pair of scissors, and trim away as much as possible to get the line that you're looking for. Offer it up to the fuselage just to see how clean and flush it is against the fuselage itself. So here I'm using the 3D printed canopy as well, just to shape out a base. Slide it into the clear canopy to see what needs trimmed, and obviously a wee bit at the front there, because the canopy is obviously at an angle, so you want it nice and flat as flush as possible. So here's the turtle deck head that we've not actually installed yet. We're using this For the canopy, I actually used 2 of them just to make sure it's nice and strong at the back when I'm using a magnet for attaching it. This way the 2 pieces are in there, it's nice and firm, and it's a good heavy fit. My big fat fingers are not going to break it. So offer it up again to the rear of the canopy and just a slight trim. See how it fits. Another wee trim, and at this part it's nothing to worry about too much as long as it's a nice fit, because whatever glue, if you make a messy underside, you're not actually going to see it because of the paint when you paint the canopy itself. So just marking off the bottom, a wee angle just so it's nice and flush. So offering up the turtle deck and the former and the clear canopy at the back, it was pretty good fit. A bit fiddly this, but it's well worth it. As you can see, I've also 3D printed the wing tanks, stuck them on. Yeah, the bottom looks pretty good. It's nice and flush fit. Plenty of space in between the intakes as well. Speaking of intakes, I have no idea why it's not in the video. I must have missed that part. Apologies for this. So there's the bottom piece, using a bit of tape as to where I want it to be. Using some hot glue and mark up on the back where we're putting on the clear canopy itself. Again, trim it, just trying to trim it in line with the fuselage, the turtle deck itself. And then I'm measuring up a small piece for the inside, just so that the canopy, once it goes on, it's nice and tight. It doesn't, slide a bit sloppy from side to side. It should be nice and flush. Just a 6mm piece of foam. Now at the front it was a bit narrower than the tail, but that looks like a good fit in there. Again, just using a wee bit of tape in there, and what we'll do is we'll hold that in just slightly above the outer surfaces. Mark there where I think it's going to be, and I put some Yoo-hoo pour on it. Give it a wee chance to air dry, and then from the back slide the canopy into position. And that should be nice fit. Yeah, it worked out pretty well. So again, just sliding about test fitting, and always going back to the clear canopy and test fitting that as well. And it looked fantastic. So here we've got wee printed seats and things, a couple of pilots, and I got some wee ejection handles there because my pilots are certainly going to need them. And then just eyeballing where I think that they should be, marking on the canopy itself where things are, and then just test fitting with the pilot to see that it's the clear canopy is not going to go against it, and then just work all your way along it. Once you're happy with it, paint your pilots, paint your cockpit, whatever colour scheme it is that you want. I've got guys here with life jackets and a big heart, that's for sure. And then just hot gluing in the 3D printed parts itself, just trying to make it as nice and neat, square as possible. Once you're happy with it, again test fit with the clear canopy, and it looked fantastic. That's your model pretty much complete, ready to go. So other than the tail billet, so obviously earlier on in the build this was supposed to be done. I left it to the end so that when it comes to moving things about and sanding, they weren't getting in the way, and obviously the vertical stabilizer wasn't in the way as well. So as much as I try to follow the build guides, I do change steps round about just to help and support the way that I build. Because no doubt if I had these on earlier, I'd probably had them broken or dunked, and you know, there'd be certainly marks in them, and I didn't want that. So mixing a wee bit of epoxy into the elevator controls and putting in the carbon spar, 6mm spar, and allowing that to go off. So once they're in and set, we're going to hook up the elevators as well. Here I'm just putting a couple of Z-bends into the control surfaces for the ailerons, and as you can see, the Z-bend goes back in itself so that it sits behind the aileron and doesn't get caught by the push rod itself. You know, it doesn't obstruct any movement. And these will have big throws, but like I say, I can trim these down using the radial. But doing it that way with the reverse push rod, the reverse Z-bend, it worked out pretty well. So just checking that the movements on the servos are in the right direction. On the radial, just reverse one of them. Once you're happy that they're all centered up and working fine, connect up your push rods, and as you can see, it's all working as it should. Yes, big throws, but wait till you see the elevator throws. Again, you know, I can trim them back. So here again, I'm just setting up the push rods, connecting them, making sure everything's nice and tight and ready to go. There's a wee bit extra there, so I just trimmed that off. Try and get it as level as possible. And the wee side panel teardrop things, I'm not sure what they're called, but I use them as a guide for lining up both the elevator surfaces to make sure they're nice and even. But all worked pretty well. There was no binding stickiness, but whoa, that's big throws there. That's eject. Next part is the vertical stabilizer, and apologies I haven't actually got footage of me sticking it in and gluing it, but what I did was I trimmed it a wee bit on the inside and lined it up by placing the jet on two even sized books. Sorry, it was the boxes, the EDF boxes for the MFS units that I have, and then I epoxied the inside and then added the vertical stabilizer, held it so it was nice and vertical and as true as possible, and it looked fantastic. Finished off pretty well. So here with the canopy, once you start with clear canopies, certainly for me, there's no going back. Taped it off, getting it ready to hit the paint shop. So once the canopy was done, we're ready to get the rest of it, and true to my fashion, paint it before I do the maiden, so that I've no excuses as to, oh, I lost orientation, which I do. But finished it off and it looked fantastic. So that's it for the build, guys. I really hope that this build video has helped you if you choose to build the Gnat for yourself. I will be uploading the wee walkthrough and maiden flight, but like I was saying, the Johnny Pellegro's build of the Gnat was absolutely stunning. The video that he had his friend maiden for him, just equally as gorgeous. It looked a fantastic flyer, and I hope I can keep my fingers on this one and avoid all the obstacles that I seem to find. So if you managed to stay this long, thanks again, pilots, and I really hope that it's helped you in some way if you choose to build it. And again, apologies for not sticking to the build plan 100%. Like I say, thanks again, pilots. Look forward to seeing your builds of the Folland Gnat. Thank you.